So as the next feature, as I mentioned in the earlier episode, we can look into the additive animations. So if you look at our current data table instance, here we already has been added one of the additive animations, but I think we haven't used it, right? So if you go to the general category inside jump, we have this jump recovery additive animation. So if I show you the anim instance, so this is the additive animation, right? So basically it's like sort of ending the jump, and once it lands, it gives sort of a recovery feedback before moving to the idle animation, right? So let's play test the existing jump. So currently you can see there is no recovery additive has been applied. So once the character is landed on the ground after the jump finishes, his foots are actually sliding slightly and goes to the idle animation, right? So this is fine, but I think if we applied the recovery additive animation, this would be much nicer, right? Because there are two animations need to be blend seamlessly without having this sort of a foot sliding, right? Okay, so let's apply this recovery additive animation as our first additive animation, but actually I'll implement set of features at the ABP locomotion instance. So whenever we need new animations to be implemented, we can reuse those existing logics, right? So this is not only for specializing for the jump recovery, but for any sort of additive animation, right? Such as hit reacts or any sort of a reactive animation like that. Okay. Okay. Now let's go to the anim graph, and here we have locomotion instance and turn in place, and we have the control rig. Okay. And I think maybe we can bit organize this anim graph. So I will promote this to a saved cache post called default post cache, right? And I can connect that default post cache to here. Okay. Now I'll make a comment for this called control rig icon. I'll make a comment to this as well, and I'll call it as final pause. Okay. Now we need to add the additive animations soon after we finishes our locomotion state machine graph, right? So I will use locomotion post cache, and I'll need to apply additive animations, right? So there is a node called apply additive, and we can use it like this. And for the configurations, I think the default configurations would be 5. Okay, and then we can apply the additive animations, whatever additive animations that we want, to here. Right, so how can we do that? So there are set of nodes that we need to implement. So instead of doing all of those stuff at here, let's create an animation layer specifically targeted to those sort of full body additive animations. So I'll create a new animation layer and I'll name it as full body additives. Right, and there let's create a new state machine. I'll call it as full body additive. Let's say. Okay, so now we need 3 states actually, right? So I'm implementing initially the additive animations for the jump recovery. So there are 3 states that we need to add here to properly implement this additive animation. So initially we have identity state, right? Actually this won't implement any animation, but it will remain as a idle state, right? So I'll call it as identity, and then we have identity animation that has been played at the air, so I'll call it as air identity. And whenever we land on the ground, we have another state called land recovery, right? And once the land recovery is done, we move back to the identity pose, right? So those are the 3 states and the respective transitions, right? So as I said earlier, for the identity pose we don't need to implement anything. Let's keep it as it is. But for the AR identity, right now I don't have sort of a additive animation for the AR state, so I will keep it's empty as well. But for land recovery I have animation, therefore let's play it using a sequence player. Sequence player, right, and make sure to expose this as a pin, right? And we don't need to loop this animation because the recovery animation will be played only once, right? Okay, and then we can use the jump recovery additive animation, which is this one. So if you forgot where did we implement this one, you can go and see the find references. So here inside set data animation, not thread save function, we have this jump collapse graph, and inside there we have initialized this jump recovery additive, right? Okay, now I have this jump recovery additive, but I need to blend it with the identity pose, right? Because additive animations will be played as overlay with the existing animation, right? So this is not an independent animation that has been played separately. Instead, it's sort of blending with 2 different animations and try to make sort of approximation, right? So the transition would be seamless. Okay, so there actually to do that, we have a function called two-way blend. Right, so it's not appearing. Try to disable the context switch. Right, actually in Unreal Engine 5.3 it doesn't have that function, so I'm currently using 5.3 version, but from 5.4 version onwards, actually there is a function called two-way blend, right? So you can use that that anim node function, but if you're using a older version like 5.3, then there is a function called blend, right? This one. So it is the exact same function, but the naming convention is or the signature function signature name is different, right? But here you can see the description is, it says blend two poses together, right? So this is what we need actually. So as the B pose, this is the additive animation that we need to play, and as the first pose or the first animation frame is the additive identity pose, right? So there is a function or there is a node called additive identity pose. Basically this will return an identity pose for our additive animation, right? So let's say if it doesn't have a specific targeted animation that has been played already, that has been implemented separately, then we can use this additive identity pose node, so it will resolve it automatically, right? So this blend will be automatically resolved. Okay, then I can connect it to here, compile and save. And for the alpha, actually we can have an implementation. But how? Right, so so let's add a one become relevant function to here and see what we can do. So I'll add a new binding on become relevant, and I'll call it as land recovery start lay. Okay, and this is an node function. Okay, and here I need to calculate the initial land recovery alpha. So how can we do that? Yeah, so do we have a way to identify the time of fall? No, right? Right. So I have gone through my reference project, and I think we need to implement a separate functions to calculate those time of falling sort of data. Right. So I'll go to functions and create a new function called update jump fall data layer. And inside the blueprint thread safe update animations thread safe functions, we have this data. So right before update jump fall data, I will use this function, but make sure to make it as thread safe, otherwise it will give an error. Okay, we have this animation now, function now, and I need to capture the delta time. So I will create a new input, delta time, which is float. Right? And for the delta time, I think we can plug the same one. Right, so inside this function now I need to do the calculations if I'm failing. So if I'm falling, then we need to calculate the time of falling. So I'll create a new variable called time falling, which is a float. I'll move to the jump category, and initially the time falling will be the time falling plus the delta time. Right. Then if I'm not falling, then I have to check whether if I'm jumping. Right. So if I'm jumping, then I need to reset this time falling. Right. So it will be 0. Okay, so this is how we calculate the time falling, and it will be calculated at where? At here. Right. And then I have to use that. Right. So I'll move this function to blueprint thread save functions category, and let's go back to that land recovery start layer function. So I don't know why actually this one is keep jumping to this update fall land anim layer. I think it's a bug, but I'm not quite sure. See, anyway, so now we have time falling, and I can map range clamped, because actually the delta time could be a very higher value, so we don't need to implement higher values inside our land recovery start layer. So we need to clamp those based on a specific range, right? So the range would be 0 to 0, 1, 0.1 to 1, right? Because this is alpha, so the alpha go maximum up until 1, and minimum it could be either 0 or something like that, but I think the 0.1 would be nice to have, right? Okay, and then I can promote this to a variable, and I'll name it as land recovery alpha. Right. Plus, if we are crouching, actually we don't need to do these sort of calculations. So if I'm crouching and if I'm trying to jump, the recovery alpha should be lower than when I'm standing and jump, right? So I'll use this select float. So if I'm crouching, the recovery alpha should be less affected, so I will multiply it by 0.5, and if I'm not crouching, I will use the existing clamped value, right? So this is just for distinguish in between how the jump affects when I'm crouching and when I'm standing, right? Okay, now we have this function, so I can go to the land recovery. So there actually we calculate the time falling at here at on become relevant, and at the next frame onwards I can apply that alpha to smoothly blend in between these two animations, right? So I will use land recovery alpha over here. Okay, right, now the states are done, but we have to complete these transitions, right? So I'll start initially from here, and as the first transition we need to determine if we are not in the ground, then we are go to the AI identity, right? So do we have a variable called is on ground? Yeah, we have is on ground. And if I'm not in the ground, then I move into the AI identity state, right? And if I'm at the AI identity state, then I need to make a transition to land recovery soon after I touch the ground, right? Which means is on ground, right? Is on ground is true. Then the land recovery will be played, and soon after the land recovery has been played, it should jump back to the identity pose, right? So I can add the automatic rule based sequence transition, because whatever we played at the land recovery, soon after it finishes, it should be automatically go back to the identity pose, right? Plus, for the safe side, I will add another transition, right? And I'll call it as, actually we can use the exact same one that we been used here, right? Because if I'm trying to jump it again, I have to go back to the identity and play the recovery again. Okay, right. And for the priorities, actually I will make this one as priority 1, this transition, and the automatic rule based transition, actually I think yeah, since I implemented this is on ground, I will make it as not automatic, right? So this warning won't be triggered anymore, and I'll make the other one is automatic rule based transition and it's priority, right? So if I quickly recap about these two transitions, from land recovery to identity, we have a priority order 1 transition, which is basically checking whether we are not in the ground, and we have the second additional transition with the priority order 2, and it is automatic rule based transition, and it doesn't implement anything at here, right? Okay, and then yeah, and then we can go to the anim graph, and here we can use that full body additives. Compile and save. Okay, so since we have this additive, now we can actually save this one for a pause catch, and we can attach it to here and use it, right? So let's see how we can do that. So I will save this to a new pause cache called additive pause cache. Right, and instead of this locomotion pause catch, I will use that additive pause catch. Right. And for the alpha, actually, we can have sort of a pre-configured value at our data table instead of hard coding it as one. So let's see how we can do that. Yeah. So let's go to the DT and imset data table, and for the configs, let's set a new field called jump recovery additive alpha. So we can actually dynamically configure these alpha values based on specific movement group. Right. So to do that, let me quickly look at my documentation. Right. Okay. So let's go to the structs, and inside animation we have inside the movement we have a anim config, and let's set a new field, and I'll call it as I'll call it as jump recovery additive alpha. Right, and this should be a float, and as the default alpha I'll make it as 0.65. right. Okay, and since we have made a structure change, let's save it here, and let's save this one and this one, and let's go all the way up, and inside general let's save this one, and what, and anim general, and finally anim set, and then we can save the data table. We can go to the components, compile, and save. Right. So if I go to the data table instance, now we have this config field. So we have config field at two different places actually. We have a config at sprint. We have a jump alpha specifically focused on sprint, and we have another config jump recovery additive alpha at here. Right. And I think even if I set the default value as 0.5, somehow it has been reverted back to 0. So let's quickly set these values. Okay, so I think I can start from sprint config. So for the sprint config jump recovery additive alpha, I'll keep it as 0.45, and rest of the movement related additive alphas I'll make it as 0.65. So for the walk 0.65, and for jog jump recovery is 65. And how about crouch? For crouch also I'll make the jump recovery additive alpha as 0.65. Okay, save all, And then what? Then we can go to the ABP locomotion, and inside set animation data function, inside configs, actually we have this record. So this one is for config for any sort of movement, and I think we have a separate config for sprint as well. Oh no, right? Yeah, we have this config for here. Okay, so I'll promote this to a variable called jump recovery additive alpha. I'll move it to the jump category. And I'll set it here. Okay. Right. And for sprint, I think we don't have specific configurations yet. But let me take a look. So we have this anim sequences, sprint start. Let's see. Yeah, that has been implemented. Yeah, here we have animations. But also here we expose a config instance. So actually, I think for the sprint as well, we can configure that jump recover additive alpha there. Right. And I think this config has not been used for any sort of variable reinitializations rather than the movements, right? So the movements, actually we use these configs and we set all the necessary clampings and the stuffs there, and IK stuffs and all. But I think we have to do the same thing for sprint as well, right? So for sprint we have this at here, so I'll make some space and let's break it. Right. So mainly I'm interested on this jump recovery additive alpha. So first let's set it. Like this. And for the distance matching as well, I think we can reinitialize these instances. Yeah, we have those distance matching stuff at here. Right, so for the sprints, actually we need to only consider on starts and cycle states. So start and cycle stops will be initialized like this. And I'll hide the other stuff. Right. And then I need to set this jump recovery additive alpha and stuff only when I'm sprinting, right? So if I'm sprinting, then I can set this jump recovery additive alpha. Otherwise, I will keep the jump recovery additive alpha as it is, like it pass by the movement groups, and I'll keep executing this stuff. Okay. And I think this disable leg IK and disable leg IK while moving also can be implemented, because we don't need to play IK stuff when we are sprinting. Okay. Right. So now I think we have been properly configuring our configs for sprints as well. So I found this leftover part when I'm trying to implement this jump recovery developer. Okay. So this stuff actually not specifically focused on the additive stuff, but this stuff will be used for these printing configurations. So it's good to implement those stuff at here, otherwise we will forget to implement those stuff later on. Right, so compile and save. And now I can use this jump recovery to develop at the animation graph at the additive place. So I will use this jump recovery developer and use it here. Compile and save, and I'll comment this as additives. Right. Let me quickly look at my documentation, and I need to double check actually. Yeah, yeah, we need to implement some other stuffs as well, because currently this one is only focusing on the jump recovery additive. But yeah, so since we have been implemented it, let's try to test it. Okay, I think the additive animation is been applied, but there is a bug. Okay, let me see. Right, so you can see this warning at here, like actually if we are need to play a additive animation, we need to make the existing animation sequence as additive, otherwise the additive animation can't be played at the anim instance, right? So that's why it has those sort of weird issues, right? So at the dt anim set, let's go to that jump recovery additive animation. So this is anim sequence, but this is not additive, right? So inside the additive settings you can see like the additive anim type is no additive. So instead let's make it as local space additive animation, and I will use a specific frame from this animation where I can apply the additive animations and other stuff. So let's use frame from this animation, and I'm currently interested on this frame 20, right? Maybe not, we can go up until to the end, right? Yeah, 28 maybe. Okay, so now let's try to play again. Right, now you can see the recovery animation, jump recovery additive animation has been applied, right? Okay, great. Now you can see there is a smooth transition in between our jump and the corresponding animation to be played, right? There is no foot sliding has been applied. Okay. Awesome. Right. So this is specifically for jump recovery full body additives, but I think later on we are going to use the additive animations for the other montages and stuff like that. So what we can do is we can specify those slots that we are going to use at here. So later on when we are applying the additive animations, those slots will be used, right? But for now, as the reference, I will add those slots to here, so it will be like basically feature complete. But when it actually comes to the practical implementations, I will explain it again. Okay. So the first slot we need our full body slot. After apply this stuff, and before applying the additives, I need to apply the slot with additive heat reacts, right? So additive heat reacts will be used to blend with the existing base animation with the full body locomotion pose, right? So make sure to add these two nodes to here as well. But currently I can't visualize those stuff in play because currently we are not implemented this feature yet, but later on I will be implementing this feature and I will explain it how those additive animation will be played based on this stuff, right? Okay, so I think additive animation stuffs are also done, and yeah, let's make a final play test. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So additive animation is working properly now. We have very smooth transitions in between two different animations. So basically the additive animation is being played in between two animations to smoothen the transition, which is great. Okay, so those are the stuff that I need to cover in this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one. See you there. Thank you.